Hello, friends. Today I am going to talk about a country that has been facing endless anarchy and a trillion misfortunes. The common folks of Afghanistan are unaware that they are sitting on a mineral wealth that is estimated to be worth between 1 and 3 trillion dollars. The ignorance is due to a lack of access to quality institutions of education and information, which need a liberal, progressive, and peaceful environment to bloom. Historically, Afghanistan has remained the battleground for great gamers since ancient times. Over the millennia, Cambodians, Persians, Macedonians, Mauryas, Bactrians, Scythians, Parthians, Mongols, and many others had either annexed or ravaged this hapless region. Consequently, Afghanistan has many ethnic groups ranging from Pashtuns, Tajiks, Hazaras, Uzbeks, Turkmen, Aimak, Baloch, Nuristanis, Pashai, Pamirs, and many others. And most of these ethnic groups have got predominance in a particular, in a specific region of Afghanistan, each of them. The Tajiks are near Tajikistan, Uzbeks near Uzbekistan, like that. They are adjacent to them. The traditional warlords from Tajik, Uzbek, Hazara, Durrani, and Gilzai tribes resort to periodic bloodletting, which has continued for generations. The scenario turns more gruesome with the running battles between Shias and Sunnis. Shias and Sunnis are being backed by Iran and Saudi Arabia, respectively. So, now these two countries have been interfering in Afghanistan's internal affairs for a very long time. Fierce tribal pride and a fanatical devotion to medieval values have only made the region ungovernable. Nobody can really govern it for any decent length of time. The most powerful colonial power of its time, Great Britain, had to pay a heavy price for trying to subjugate Afghanistan. It settled for a compact in the form of the Durand Line. The mighty Soviet Union, and this Durand Line, let me explain, it is the international border between Afghanistan and Pakistan. Pakistan wants it to be legitimized, but successive governments in Afghanistan have refused to recognize it. And they feel that it has been imposed upon them, especially the Pashtuns. They are quite fiercely opposed to the Durand Line because their land has been divided and their people have been divided. The mighty Soviet Union too was forced to retreat ingloriously. Now it is the turn of the United States of America to suffer the disgrace. These invasions, coupled with the stranglehold of local warlords, ensured that the march of civilization bypassed Afghanistan. Will the second coming of the Taliban stabilize Afghanistan? Will it bring the badly needed peace and prosperity to the land and its people? Have the Taliban changed enough to realize the value of modern and civilized governance? Will they enable the people of Afghanistan, to realize their full potential as global citizens? Unfortunately, peace may not prevail in Afghanistan anytime soon. The Taliban regime's domestic policies are not yet clear. They present one face to the world through the media, international media, and they behave very differently within the boundaries of Afghanistan. How would the minorities and women be treated? How harshly the Sharia will be implemented? Its economic and social policies, including education too, will influence the state of Afghanistan. So what sort of economic policies they will pursue, what sort of education they would approve to be given to the people of to the youth of Afghanistan. All this is bound to affect the future of Afghanistan. Despite their public assurances to the contrary, the Taliban may find it difficult to forgive former supporters of the US occupation forces. They were occupation forces. They had no business to be in Afghanistan in the first place. Already, resistance movements are sprouting up in various parts of Afghanistan, especially in the Panjshir Valley, which has remained unconquerable. Vice President or the self-proclaimed working president of Afghanistan, Amrullah Saleh and Ahmad Masood are leading the Panjshir resistance. So they are over there, and there are news reports that some sort of negotiations are going on for Saleh and Masood to surrender. What will eventually happen, is not yet known. Pakistan has always looked upon Afghanistan as its backyard that would provide strategic depth during a military confrontation with India. The Pakistan military will certainly try to put up their stooge in Kabul, which will create resentment across the tribal divides. These tribes of Afghanistan, they are fiercely independent. It is really strange how the Pakistani leaders have refused to learn their lessons from their past blunders. The gun culture, which is now widespread in Pakistan, and drug abuse and the spiraling crime rates have been direct results of Ziaul Haq's policy of supporting extremists both in Afghanistan and India with the help of American arms and dirty money. This dirty money had also been coming from certain West Asian countries, not just from America. Now the Pakistanis have done the same with the tacit support from China and Russia. What is worse, neither the Haqqani network nor Tehreek-e-Taliban of Pakistan has forgiven and forgotten the Pakistan Army's duplicities. The relentless US drone attacks against Taliban and Pakistan Army's Operation Zarb-e-Azb in the FATA region and North Waziristan against Al-Qaeda, Tehreek-e-Taliban, Haqqani network and Islamic State affiliates have made the Pashtuns develop massive resentment against the Pakistan military. In fact, Pakistan military had been siding with Americans as well as the terrorist groups. This is something which goes beyond one's comprehension. How did they succeed in doing this and not offend the Americans? Or perhaps Americans winked at it all because they needed Pakistan. China and Russia had their reasons for extending covert support to the Taliban. China has its eyes on the $1 trillion mineral reserves of Afghanistan, especially the abundance of rare earth elements which have a strategic value that cannot be quantified in terms of any currency. Moreover, a Taliban government provides an opportunity to China for lending funds and virtually taking over its strategic assets and then dictate terms to the government in power, as it has been doing to several countries, including Sri Lanka and Myanmar in our neighborhood. In fact, they have been doing this to several African countries also. This also provides it with the opportunity to acquire greater clout among Central Asian countries. In fact, China has been fancying itself as the successor to Soviet Union as far as treating the Central Asian republics as part of its geostrategic domain. For Russia, the American departure from Afghanistan presents a pleasant prospect of a vastly reduced US clout in the former Soviet states like Ukraine and Georgia. Already Ukraine has seen how ineffective the Americans had been in preventing the Russian annexation of Crimea. Crimea was part of Ukraine, and Putin's forces just walked in almost sauntered in and took over Crimea, and nobody could do anything about it. Yet, neither Russia nor China can be too comfortable with the rise of the Taliban. Both countries have significant Muslim populations which are not exactly reconciled to their second-class statuses in the two countries. The Chechens in Russia may feel encouraged to renew their bid for an independent Chechnya. There is every possibility of Islamist terrorists renewing their bid to destabilize Central Asian republics. There are confirmed reports of Al-Qaeda presence in several parts of Afghanistan. This terrorist group is working in tandem with the formidable Haqqani network. They may foment trouble not only in Chechnya but also in Dagestan. Although the Russians are making cautious, friendly overtures to the Taliban, they may be discreetly working with Tajikistan and Uzbekistan also to create resistance against the Taliban in northern Afghanistan, even while keeping open the channels of communication in Kabul. With memories of the Chechen war horrors still fresh, Russians are well aware of the consequences of allowing Islamist terror groups to enter the Central Asian republics. Uyghurs in China's Xinjiang province have been smarting under the Han domination for long, and their resentment is bound to explode into an armed uprising with the backing of an ultra-right regime in Afghanistan, the present one, Taliban's. The East Turkestan Islamic Movement, also known as the Turkestan Islamic Movement, may renew its violent activities in the Xinjiang province to avenge atrocities committed by the Chinese government on Uyghur Muslims. Moreover, its all-weather friend Pakistan is bound to become more vulnerable to hostile activities, funded and backed by the new Taliban government in Kabul. In fact, Taliban have a history of turning upon their creators, the United States. So, what is Pakistan to them? Pakistan is nothing when compared to the mighty United States. And this is evidenced by the recent spate of terror attacks on Chinese workers and assets in Pakistan, and these attacks have been executed by none other than Tehreek-e-Taliban of Pakistan. India may find it hard to reconcile to the rise of the Taliban in Afghanistan at a time when it is facing a real possibility of fighting on more than two fronts: the land frontiers in the north and the seas in the south. The Bay of Bengal, the Arabian Sea and the Indian Ocean, all the three are now hotting up, not just heating, hotting up, as far as military or naval presences of several countries is concerned, including our own Indian Navy and the Quad countries, etc. That is a separate topic. We'll discuss it some other time. There is every possibility of Pakistan and China using Afghanistan's Islamic militias to create disturbance in India. Would India join hands with its friends in the Northern Alliance to destabilize the Taliban government? Or would it take the diplomatic path to either have a working relationship with Afghanistan or convince the international community to ostracize the Taliban at present ruling Afghanistan? Whatever it does, the government of India needs to stamp out the divisive elements within its rank and file who are creating a massive population of resentful minorities. It is unwise to alienate those who are your own. We should never do that. President Joe Biden's decision to withdraw American forces from Afghanistan has been widely criticized. Even Great Britain has made disapproving noises, and Great Britain is known for its steadfast loyalty to USA. Doubts have been ignited in Taiwan about Americans as reliable allies. If China decides to go all out to annex Taiwan, Can the US be trusted to remain steadfast in its commitment to protecting Taiwan? This question is no longer hypothetical. However, it must be admitted that American interests are vested in Taiwan on a vastly greater scale than they were in Afghanistan. If America does an Afghanistan to Taiwan, it is going to have implications for the entire NATO's credibility, not just of America's. The American president may have corrected a historical blunder committed 2 decades ago. Successive American presidents, including the Bush father-son duo, have been resorting to mindless violation of the sovereignty of several West Asian nations. It made neither economic nor strategic sense to destroy Iraq and Libya. Strangely, Americans ignored history while deciding to invade Afghanistan. No power on earth has ever been able to subjugate Afghanistan. Moreover, the invasion appeared more a case of hurt egos than any sensible strategic move. Can Afghanistan break out of the stereotype in which it has remained trapped for centuries? This is a very big question. Can it emerge as a modern Islamic state? It would be unrealistic to expect them, the Taliban, to adopt a Western-style democracy as Turkey did under Kemal Atatürk. Some people call him Kemal Atatürk. But surely the Taliban can provide a far more liberal and progressive government than what they did during their previous shift. They can do that. Previous stint. Let us not forget that the present Taliban coalition has several groupings that have diverse characteristics. Right now, they appear united in their vision of a Taliban-ruled Afghanistan. They would need to remain so and rein in the possibility of individual ego clashes and ambitions to pull the country out of the swirling dark waters of despair. And along with this, they would also need to suppress their urge to commit atrocities on their own people, which they did last time with impunity. Much will depend on the Supreme Commander or Emir, Haibatullah Akhundzada. Born in 1961, Akhundzada became the Taliban's third Supreme Commander after the US killed his predecessor in a 2016 drone strike. He is better known, Akhundzada is better known as a religious leader than a military commander, and he maintains a low profile. It remains to be seen whether he remains reticent or turns into a fiery demagogue. Power does strange things to people. Abdul Ghani Baradar has been the most visible face of the Taliban. Most probably, he will head the next government. He was closely associated with Osama bin Laden and co-founded the Taliban along with Mullah Muhammad Omar, who was the group's first supreme leader. At present, an unknown personality, Baradar's actions may well mold the future of Afghanistan society. He is visible, but not much is known about his mindset. Abdul Hakim or Hakim Haqqani is Akhundzada's close confidant and has been in charge of negotiations with the US-backed Ghani regime. Now it is no more there, but at that time when Ghani was in power. He also heads the Council of Senior Religious Scholars. Sher Muhammad Abbas Stanekzai speaks English fluently and has travelled the world extensively as Deputy Foreign Minister when the militants last controlled power in Afghanistan. But not much can be expected of him in terms of influencing the Taliban's domestic policies. Zabihullah Mujahid, the main Taliban spokesperson, may play an important role in influencing the global perception of the Taliban. He is good at interacting with journalists and does everything within his power to brighten the Taliban image through the international media. The above five leaders may well try to fashion a steady and relatively progressive polity in Afghanistan, but the same cannot be said of the following two. Sirajuddin Haqqani, the head of the Haqqani network, has the potential to destroy the coalition from within. He controls the coalition's finances and military assets across Pakistan and Afghanistan. If his ambitions get the better of his good sense, one can say goodbye to the prospects of peace in Afghanistan and maybe even in Pakistan. You never know with Haqqani network. Muhammad Yaqub is the son of Taliban founder Mullah Omar. He may well feel cheated out of his rightful place at the top of the hierarchy. Since he is a product of the Pakistan-run madrasas and now manages military activities in tandem with Sirajuddin Haqqani, he can be a problem for the current Taliban dispensation and even for Pakistan. Let us not forget the trouble brewing in Panjshir. Saleh and Masood can upset all calculations if they manage to garner vital military and logistic support from neighboring Central Asian countries. Afghanistan needs an eternal respite from the vicious circle of turmoil and killings. It needs modern institutions of governance and education that will nurture tolerant and progressive attitudes among the rulers and the ruled, the electors and the elected. It may appear idle or too idealistic, but let us imagine if the Afghan leaders play the role of a unifying force, provide solidity to the nation, and adopt a scientific temper and progressive vision, Afghanistan would have a bright chance of becoming an economic power with a high degree of technological sophistication. Do they have it in them to perform the miracle of creating a new template for a liberal, progressive and Islamic democracy? This I am talking about the present rulers, the Taliban. Would they do it? Do they have it in them to shed all their ideological baggage and all that medieval mindset and think in terms of Pakistan and Afghanistan and its people? If this miracle does not happen, and this is a very serious question, the balkanization of Afghanistan may well be the real consequence in the not too distant future. And that is a very horrific prospect, not just for Afghanistan, but for South Asia in particular and the rest of the world in general, because once the turmoil begins, you do not know where its rippling effect will go. It might engulf Central Asia, it may engulf the entire South Asia, West Asia, which may force the NATO and other countries to intervene, and after that, it can be anybody's guess what would happen. So, the Taliban will have to make the choice right now. They will have to modernize. Otherwise, things will really get very, very dangerous for all humanity. Thanks for being with me. I hope you all liked it. I'll come back with another edition soon. Bye till then.